why do people not go to the gym? To me, the reason for going was obvious. I was 14 years old and 49 kilograms, very active but extremely skinny, and I didn't used to mind much because that's simply how it should be for the sports that I did. I ran most days, did karate 2 to 3 times a week, and then football twice a week for most of my childhood. I really liked the feeling of structure and control that it gave me, which you couldn't get from video games. It was always nice to have a sport to look forward to when sat in the back of a boring English lesson, but this slowly began to change as I got older and naturally became more conscious of just how skinny I was. You see, when you're thin, you don't tend to get brutally bullied for that alone. It's more just the passing comments, which still provided enough of a motive for me to try and get a bit stronger. So, as instructed by a guy named Scooby on YouTube, I began doing some basic exercises.
This is a teen workout video for people ages 10 to 17.
I doubled my push-ups pretty quickly, and everything was progressing fine, until I remember seeing a series of images, which changed everything. There were a few like this, but from the comments on Instagram, the message was clear. People were focused on how sickly the long-distance runners looked, while the cyclists were praised. I could just imagine myself being in one of those photos when I was older. I didn't realise this is what adults thought. So, out of curiosity, I investigated further and found other similar images, which brought me to a weird part of the bodybuilding forum. It was basically gym Facebook, but on each profile you could see their age, stats, and how much they can lift. In some of the conversations, there were guys in their 20s complaining about only being able to bench 225 pounds, talking about things like how you should only be allowed to wear a vest if you're over 200 pounds and lean. Meanwhile, I could barely bench press the bar. Even though I gained a bit of muscle with Scooby, I became hyper aware of how I looked and felt skinnier than ever. I fully now believed that the reason for my lack of confidence was because I was skinny, and the solution to all my problems was to gain muscle, and I really latched onto this idea. The way that adults spoke about it was like a pack of wolves who were either a skinny, unsuccessful beta or a successful muscular alpha, and most of this was determined by your appearance. And as much as Scooby's slow and steady advice made sense, his talks about sustainability and realistic expectations, I now thought he was being too cautious, as older people tend to be.
Gaining muscle is an extremely slow process.
Besides, there were all of these insane body transformations popping up on social media, where teenagers would go from extremely skinny to almost a different person. That's what I wanted. So I began following as many as possible. Every channel I watched on YouTube was now fitness based, and I was ready to go for my goal as if my life depended on it. And after the memorably painful experience of recording myself for the first time, I was ready to begin the journey. After what I thought was good research, I came up with this, which was to be my first routine. While it's questionable, I still got results. Apparently, noticeable results. I still couldn't tell if people were being sarcastic at this point, but it motivated me to become more consistent with weight training. I reduced the running and followed more sensible programs. The more compliments and positive feedback I got, the more I was motivated to become more strict with my routine. My strategy for trying to ensure optimal progress was simple. I'd research the people who had completed these body transformations, work out a time frame they achieved their results, and then try and match them myself. The main people I'd follow were a group of 3 to 4 fitness YouTubers. They all knew each other, got great results, and didn't look like unnaturally giant bodybuilders. That was all I needed. And this method actually seemed to work for about a year, which is when I began struggling to keep up, despite the fact that their sleep and diet were both notoriously poor, which confused me. Anyway, still desperate to keep up, I began studying celebrity diets, bodybuilder diets, and anyone who gained muscle extremely quickly.
Chicken, fish, maybe steak, always protein 6 times a day. Protein, steamed vegetables, and occasionally some brown rice or something like that. and just like that. No alcohol, no sugar, pretty much nothing that's fun.
And I'd watch loads of those foods to avoid videos in an attempt to clean up my diet as much as possible.
Today we're going to go over those foods that you think are healthy that I'm going to show you today are actually making you fat.
Every time I felt I was struggling to keep up, or felt I looked skinny and out of proportion, I'd improve my routine a little more, or try the next fad. After many iterations, I was eating so clean that I couldn't chew the can of plain tuna which I was supposed to eat as my meal, so I did what any sane person would do.
Nice.
What used to be a healthy meal consisting of a tuna sandwich and banana was now a tuna protein shake, because fructose, high carb foods, and mayonnaise were all foods which I considered bad, and I tried to make a lot of my meals in this way, consisting of as much protein as possible while minimizing the fat and the carbs. But then there were other days where I'd break and end up binge eating random things, such as an entire loaf of bread, feeling awful for the rest of the week because of it. The meals I was cooked by my parents would go from this to this. After I binned the bad parts, my gym routine never felt enough, so I began adding weights to my school bag and wearing ankle weights around the house. I'd frequently miss social events to avoid being around bad food and the guilty feeling I got from not training. When I was 16, I remember one of the YouTubers I watched began eating food for the taste and then spitting it out, and I genuinely thought that that was a good idea. And these unhealthy short-term habits just kept adding up. As a result of all of this, my running speed slowly began to drop. I'd sometimes have to cheat and hold onto the sides of a treadmill, until one day, after placing my t-shirt on the top of the treadmill, it generated enough static to give me an electric shock. So for all future runs, I'd put a t-shirt in the same place to stop me from cheating and holding on. Now, you would have liked to have thought that I'd realised things were going too far, at the point where I'm chugging tuna and electrifying my treadmill. But no. In fact, despite always having shin splints, colds, sleep trouble, severe fatigue, and increasingly poor performance in all sports, I didn't see a problem. I just needed to push through it. This was simply the price of dedication. I was now 17, and over the last 3 years, I'd placed such an importance on getting lean that all other aspects of my life was sacrificed, which I very much regret. What's more, is I could have achieved better results following a more sustainable lifestyle. Unfortunately, I only realised this when the people I watched started being called out for being probable fake naturals, as their strength suddenly shot up an insane amount. It no longer felt like the competition that I created in my head was there. I took a step back and realised that what had started out as an attempt to gain confidence, something I used to have a sense of routine and control, was now controlling me entirely. Even at this point, I felt skinny fat. I wasn't even close to some of the people I was following. Despite getting into what I should have recognised is good shape for a 17-year-old, getting my black belt in karate, and doing well at school, I still felt like a massive failure. The worst thing was, I was seen as healthy, and it's extremely hard to change anything, because it literally felt like part of my identity. Even my general doctor said I was healthy, as everyone thought I was, but I'd never felt worse. Hopefully, you spotted a few problems before I did. While a lot of these behaviours probably seem odd, you have to understand I was quite young, had a lack of self-awareness, and developed an eating disorder known as orthorexia, which is essentially an unhealthy obsession with health, and I experienced most of the negative effects. I made so many mistakes, the first being that I was comparing myself to others. Even if they didn't take enhancements, I should never have done this, as genetic variation and everyone's response to training is different. A much better approach would be to simply see what you're capable of and compare yourself with yourself.
Now listen, there's nothing wrong with trying to diet and better yourself, to look better, to feel better. There is something wrong with chasing a look that's impossible to reach. Perfection, which is impossible for everyone, and then suffering because of it. Your life should not suffer because you want to look a certain way. You should try to look a certain way for you and enjoy it and feel good about it, but not take it to the level where it's ruining your life.
Out of desperation to keep up with this imaginary competition that I created, I developed this exclusive mindset around diet, where I'd look at all the foods to exclude from my diet, when I should have focused on including nutrient-dense foods.
The thing clean eaters often miss is the fact that the dose always makes the poison. And even water, the most essential component to life, will kill you at a high enough dose. And it's no different with ice cream and French fries. What really matters is how much of that junk food you're eating and what the rest of your diet looks like.
I believe those stupid headlines which claim certain foods were bad, when in reality, the people who claim a food is inherently bad are either confused themselves or morally corrupt. As a 15-year-old, I should never have been completely excluding things like bananas and white bread because of an article or video. I tried a range of diets, thinking this next one will be superior, as the people promoting them would often claim. But the thing is, there's no one superior diet. The one which works for you is best. And it's as simple as that. Different people have different metabolisms, activity levels, and preferences. So comparing your diet to influencers who may be enhanced is not a good idea.
Even his girl's got like a visible six-pack. And he says 3,500 calories a day, bro. Which is like the most discouraging thing all of his fans just read on that day, for sure.
But the thing is, Instagram models and fitness channels are still small players. The people snatching up the beginner demographic are usually the Hollywood actors, their trainers, and people writing articles about them. This is where most of the eyes are. On the people who are heavily incentivized to exaggerate the extremity of their diets, either to attract attention, to convince you that their insane results were purely a result of hard work, or maybe an attempt to make their routine too extreme to try, to cover up pharmacological assistance. Even if they were truthful, as some are, you should still never copy them, as most undergo very unsustainable crash diets to look a certain way for a film, sacrificing their long-term health. Which is why it's so common for actors to rebound after filming.
We wrapped the movie and I fell off the wagon completely.
If they stayed completely quiet, you still have articles and videos speculating what they did to achieve their transformation, often hugely inaccurate. And I used to take these seriously because I was so desperate to make as much progress as possible. I simply thought that the leaner the better, even though in reality, nobody cares that you're single-digit body fat outside of competitive bodybuilding. So I shouldn't have made it such a goal to get there.
Jeff Nippard. He doesn't maintain shredded physique year-round, okay? He's probably low teens to mid-teens. Jeremy Etienne, Scott Herman Fitness, Christian Guzman, Alan Thrall, Vitruvian Physique. If you look at Alpha Destiny, Mike Matthews, Sean Nalawani, they maintain low teens to maybe closer to 11 to 12% most of the time.
A few people say the mainstream glorification of insanely unattainable physiques is to blame for this common oversight. But to me personally, what's more of a problem is that these issues don't get spoken about enough on the male side. When I first heard about orthorexia, it was from Natasha Ocean. I remember realizing I basically had all of the symptoms, searching for it on YouTube, and there were virtually no men talking about it. I assumed that it was a problem which mostly affected women, but I now realize it can affect anyone. A study found that 49% of study participants who followed healthy eating accounts on Instagram met the criteria for orthorexia. If your entire livelihood depends on the way you look, your chances are probably higher than average. And this is what people don't realize. My guess is that some of the biggest names in male fitness are affected by this to a very large degree. And that's why I made the videos that I have. Maybe a little dramatic, because it just seems like these problems are getting worse. But at the same time, you shouldn't have this victim mentality, blaming Hollywood, internet marketers, and teenagers who are stronger than you. The fact is, they'll probably always be there, and as stupid as I was myself to fall into many of these traps, it could have been avoided if I followed genuine science-based advice, used better progress metrics, and got professional help. What started out as trying to become as healthy as possible turned very unhealthy. I thought how you looked and how others perceived you was way more important than it was, and I compared myself to others. Now, I simply do what I enjoy, which has recently been a mixture of running, strength training, and MMA with my university, while arming myself with science-based advice. Following more experienced fitness channels, and always thinking about relativity was enough to move away from orthorexia. If you can relate, I strongly recommend that you consider professional help, as this can be quite serious if left untreated. But at the very least, I'd read this book by Renee McGregor. It's the best book I've read on the topic, and a lot of people would benefit from reading it. Or if you just want pretty much everything you need on sports nutrition, the Muscle and Strength Pyramid is where to go. This is not an anti-fitness video, and I believe everyone should care about their health. A common misconception is that being a fitness enthusiast and body positive are different things, like this video title would suggest. But the truth is, taking care of your fitness is one of the most body positive things to do. The message here is to simply stress the importance of moderation. Too much of anything can be unhealthy, even if that thing is health.
Paul Chuckle here to tell you that you don't need to spend your life munching on chicken, broccoli and rice. And always remember, just because someone's famous, it doesn't mean that everything they do is right. Have a great day, but remember, there's always no slacking.